the euphoria was around, okay, they're going to do crypto now. They're going to integrate crypto into the financial services around the world. In order for that to happen, we're going to have regulation. And so that's why the euphoria is gone. That's why people are saying crypto's dead. And it is effectively dead.
In today's video, Canadian businessman and entrepreneur Shark Tank star, known as Mr. Wonderful Kevin O'Leary, updates about the market and where we are headed next in the crypto space.
And so now this was different previously. I mean, people operated in DeFi all the time, and that wasn't a bad idea. I mean, people were able to make money and trade or whatever in DeFi. Is it different now because of how the regulation has come down, do you think? Is that why you feel that way now?
The optimism of which you speak was at a time, even just 2 years ago.
Euphoria.
Euphoria around the idea that, somebody would finally get that regulated ticket in the US, and they would lead the standard passport for all other jurisdictions, as they do in stocks and bonds. If you look at the regulations in Abu Dhabi or in Zurich or in London or in Paris or in Singapore, they are remarkably similar to the SEC's regulations on exchanges. It's the blueprint for the world.
Wow.
And so the Canadians, the OSC, they're all the same. These regulators actually talk to each other every week. And they coordinate together. And so the euphoria was around, okay, they're going to do crypto now. They're going to integrate crypto into the financial services around the world.
Right.
That's not the case right now. And so in order for that to happen, we're going to have regulation. And so that's why the euphoria is gone. That's why people are saying crypto's dead. And it is effectively dead unless and I love the rah-rah cries. In fact, I've had great performance on Bitcoin. I bought some at 17,000 and change.
Nice. It's
gone up 68%. That's great. But it's a tiny portion of my portfolio now because I am not fighting regulators. There's no upside for me in doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not suing them. That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard.
Yikes.
And I've seen lots of stupid ideas, but that is the top of the cherry.
Now, they would probably say they've been trying to work with the regulators, but it's not working. Should they just stay patient? Are they getting impatient by suing?
The regulator has unlimited resources and the backing of the federal government. The whole idea is when you end up in call it a roadblock or an impasse, you don't put out a press release. You fly to Washington and you sit down in a room with no tape recorders and talk it out. Find out what they want.
Not Zoom call.
There's no Zoom call here. You find out what they want, what they would agree to, what maybe the path is. There's all kinds of lawyers that do this for a living to find the compromise.
Sure.
You don't tell them how you're going to run your business and that you know more than they do and that they're ignorant at the ways of financial services. That strategy is so dumb. It guarantees you an impasse in perpetuity.
Wow.
And I think that the companies that do that, we don't have to name them, are going to have to change their boards and managers before they ever get any traction.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because those reputations are done. In
Destroyed.
Other words, destroyed. Wow. Now, Elon Musk, I can't remember if it was the FCC or the FTC, Communication or Trade. He wanted to meet with the top dog at one of those agencies. Let's just say it was the FTC, the commissioner of it or whatever. However, she said, no thanks. Come into compliance with all of our rules first before I'm willing to sit down and talk to you. Are there politics in this? Should he accept that and sit down with maybe the other regulators and not necessarily the top ones?
If you understand how regulators work, that's the beginning of a negotiation. That is actually an invitation to come on side.
Oh.
And the question is, I would have, I'm not saying how Elon's a very successful guy and I absolutely love him, but my answer would have been, which regulation should I be compliant on first?
Oh.
And give me a priority order and get into that dialogue.
That rhythm.
Of what it takes. And when they see you moving in that direction, the spigot opens for further dialogue. I've been regulated my whole life. And I understand the cadence of how regulators work. There's a law. They basically have an enforcement arm to enforce it. but they also want you to be successful. You're a part of the economy. Everybody thinks the regulator wants to put you out of business, or the IRS wants to put you out of business. That's not true. They simply want you to comply with the laws they've been told to administer it. And so if you come in with that white flag, you get to the front of the line. You don't beat them up. If you don't understand that, you're an idiot. That's how it works.
Would you say that, just to use an analogy, Coinbase suing the SEC is much like throwing a rock at a cop?
Oh no, it's worse.
It's worse.
It's spitting on the cop, then throwing a rock at him, then when he's on the ground, spitting on him again and doing something worse. And they don't forget. They won't be forgetting.
So Cathie Wood should sell Coinbase?
I don't think that's been one of her really good investments.
Okay. I have a suspicion, and maybe it's just tinfoil hat, that perhaps he offered to buy those companies knowing he would never, because he would never be compliant enough, it would never be approved or whatever, or they didn't have the money to do it, simply to prop up the price of Bitcoin, since about 80% of trading volume for Bitcoin is on Binance, and they just moved some of their BUSD over to Bitcoin, about, I think it was around $1 billion. Am I wrong to think that way?
No, I think CZ is the most brilliant strategist I've ever seen. He is the ultimate digital warrior. I saw what he did the week of November 6th. I was, part of that whole thing. I know exactly what happened. At least I think I do. And he was a brilliant chess player. He put his only competitor out of business in a matter of 48 hours. Yeah. Now, the cost of that is going to haunt him for a while, because there may be clawbacks to that $2.1 billion he stripped off the FTX balance sheet. And certainly the shareholders of FTX would like that. And it's going to be tied up in litigation for years. Oh, yeah. But the narrative on FTX has moved to recovery, because we've now got over $7 billion.
And what was the loss? It was about 8?
Yeah, so you've identified
wow.
This is not going to help the shareholders of either FTX US or FTX International. But the account holders are...
The depositors.
The depositors are probably going to get something back after a long period. Now, was it 30 cents, 40 cents? I have no idea on the dollar. And there's a bunch of transactions occurring in the sub-markets around assets being bought back. The bankruptcy courts will view these things going forward. But in the case of if you were the actual reason that it happened and there's a bunch of documentaries coming up. Bloomberg has one, which I think is going to be very fascinating, because they spent a lot of resources going around the world chronicling those 36 hours. Wow. And you're going to see a different view of this when they release that film. It's almost a feature. It's just fascinating. I participated in it. I was really intrigued by the depth of knowledge they had. Usually you meet these producers, they come running in and they have no idea, they've done no research. Not these guys.
Wow.
They were way ahead of the curve.
Is this the Bloomberg Intelligence Division? Or?
No, it's, Bloomberg funded, maybe they're a British crew. British do a great job on documentaries. And I think they're going to release it, I don't know what distribution channel, but it's coming, because I've had some subsequent calls with them looking for more content. It was remarkably well researched. And so it's defining the change in the industry. And I think there'll be other, there's a book being written and everything else. But what happened, it's very simple. Between FTX and Binance, they were friends at the beginning. And yeah. Binance bought 20% of the equity from Sam. And the two of them were the it kids in building this industry. And they were remarkable. What they achieved was incredible. And then when, FTX was starting to spend more time trying to win that golden prize of a regulated exchange in the U.S.
They wanted to do stocks too.
Stocks too, and sat down and, Sam Bankman-Fried spent over 50% of his hours every week in Washington at the end there. Wow. So he was really, really pushing for this. And CZ was watching this saying, this guy's going to beat me to a regulated exchange. And he was doing it in Switzerland, in London, in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, in Singapore. So what CZ did is every time they'd submit their application, he owned 20% of the equity. He'd say, on the Know Your Client, you'd have to fill out the cap table. Who owns that 20%? And he'd say, I can't disclose ownership. Over and over again. In the beginning, it was a friendly conversation saying, gee, you got to disclose it. I can't get a license. but he never disclosed it. So the board or the management of FTX finally said, we got to buy him out. We got to go back. And now the value was $32 billion. So that price tag had gone from, a few $100,000 or whatever the seed stock was, I have no idea, to basically over $2 billion cash. That's how he wiped out all of the cash off the balance sheet of FTX. And then the last, credit was done with FTT tokens, 550 million. And CZ brilliantly jammed that down Sam Bankman-Fried's throat on the morning of November 7th. And put them out of business. And all the rest of the stuff happened, but that's sort of what occurred. And that will come to light, through these documentaries and everything else. So he has that to deal with when he goes through the bankruptcy courts in the U.S., but he doesn't have to. He never has to come to the U.S.
CZ doesn't. Right.
So he can stay in the shadows. I just think it gets harder and harder as other regulators say, look.
Squeeze him over.
Yeah, that's it. And he's very profitable now. You won't be that profitable when you're regulated. You'll be the same returns as a bank at the end of the day.